Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. This channel is dedicated to finding out whether I actually know everything or not. Make sure you like and subscribe, and most importantly, make sure you ask some interesting questions. My wife ferrets out ones that she thinks might be good gotchas, and she forwards them to me. I then read them live, and then I answer, and then I look it up, and I see if I actually have a clue what I'm talking about. So let's get started this morning. Let's see. She says, okay, what is a lithium-ion battery and how do they work? Ooh, interesting. All right. Well, actually, what I'm filming on right now, of course, has a lithium-ion battery in it, as do Teslas, as do so many other things. Okay, first of all, let's just start with a battery. A battery is a device that stores energy. Wow, that's exciting, right? Like you didn't know that one already. Basically, what it does is it has two layers. There's a cathode layer and an anode layer, and one of them, the cathode, holds a negative charge and the anode holds a positive charge. And between those is a gel substance or something that allows ions to transfer back and forth between them. The difference between a battery and a capacitor is that a capacitor essentially just has, it holds two charges, like you charge it up and one becomes positive and one becomes negative, a plate, but there's kind of nothing in between for it to transfer, so they just hold the charges until you plug something in, which means a capacitor can actually release charges almost instantaneously, whereas a battery actually has to go through a process of depleting itself as the ions move back and forth as they're charged and discharged. A lithium-ion battery, of course, uses lithium ions to do the transfer of charges back and forth. So essentially, there is, and it can be multiple different kinds of materials. I know there's like cobalt and manganese and all sorts of other things. I think, oh gosh, it's like CGM, CMG, something like that. There's a type of lithium-ion battery that contains small fractions of these other ions inside of it, and they are used to create the cathode and the anode, and then also this material that's in between that allows the transfer of energy back and forth. So as you charge it, what it does is it pushes apart the positive and negative ions, and then as it discharges, the positive ions move from the anode to the cathode, and what happens is that then the electrical current goes from the from the anode to the cathode. Geez, I think I said that. Anyway, moves from the anode to the cathode, from the positive to the negative, and the negative charges actually go out through the wire and power whatever your device is, so forth. So that's the way these guys actually work. They are, of course, lithium ion is very popular these days because it gets rid of a lot of the issues that other batteries have had over the past. I mean, at a basic level, you've got like alkaline batteries, something like that, right? Which has a different mix of chemicals inside of it, and it works great. It's wonderful, except that you can't recharge it. So once, you use your little AA battery or something, you have to toss it or recycle it. Recycle it, definitely recycle it. Because it's really bad for the environment. Anyway, so once you do that, you have to discard it, and you have to get a new one to do that thing. So a rechargeable battery is nice because you can plug power into it and force the ions back apart again to create the power source that you have. NiCad and nickel cadmium batteries were very popular before lithium ion came around. They are a different sort of chemistry. Again, same basic deal, but they would discharge and recharge, and every time they discharge and recharge, they lost some of the capacity to hold a charge. So they would, I think it was called memory, they would lose charge over time, and so they would start to become less and less effective. I'm sure anyone who's older, again, like me, can remember the fact that these batteries, especially if you did not just discharge them completely, they were much better if you completely discharged them and then would recharge them from scratch. But if you didn't, they would have this memory thing, and they would start to degrade really rapidly and become very poor. Lithium-ion batteries, as much as we complain about them in our phones and stuff, and you're like, oh, my phone's like a year old, and the battery's not quite as good as it was. But if you think about it, the batteries, they've been charged and discharged multiple times. You may have had it down to 10% one time or at 90% the other time, and depending on the person you are, I'm the kind of person who always charges it like, I get to 70%, I'm like, oh my god, it's so low. And other people are like, I've got 1% left, I'm good. So anyway, but they're good at being able to deal with that kind of charge and discharge cycle where you're just, you're not being very careful about how you charge and discharge them. So they are excellent for that kind of stuff. They also are really good at being charged and discharged multiple times. The Tesla batteries have a different chemistry than what's in your phone, for example, and they're designed to be much more robust to charge and discharge cycles so that they will last. Supposedly, the new batteries now last about 500,000 miles. Issues with rechargeable batteries. A really big issue with rechargeable batteries is just a battery issue, which is the ability to compress a lot of energy into a small amount of space. So it's energy density. That's something that, a gas-powered engine or something like that, if we're going to go with like Teslas, a gas-powered engine has a lot more oomph because you can apply the energy. There's a lot more density to the energy that's there, so you don't have to carry as much gas in order to have as much power. That is being altered all the time. The chemistry is improving, and Tesla recently bought, I can't remember the company name, but anyway, they specialize in making high energy density capacitors, and those guys are kind of wrapped like an actual battery is not like a flat plate. It's nice to imagine that, and I'm sure I'll put a graphic up here eventually to show that how it works. But actually, what it is like a what were those things? Swiss rolls? I think it's Little Debbie Swiss rolls. Anyway, it's kind of wrapped up like that with the cream in the inside is the gel that goes between the anode and the cathode. So that you can wrap up more surface area in a small amount of space, which is why batteries tend to be round a lot of times these days. Or alternatively, they can stack up the stuff in a stack, which is actually the reason why a firing battery, like in a military sense, is also called a battery, because a battery literally means like multiple things. Hey, there's a bonus thing for you today, right? So it means multiple things, a battery, and that's the reason why you have multiple cells in a battery. Or alternatively, you have it wrapped up, and so you create a great deal of surface area for that. So anyway, but capacitors, high energy density capacitors or ultra capacitors or whatever, are also built in that sort of swirly spiral pattern, as opposed to just flat capacitors like you would see if you open up a motherboard on a computer or something. There's little itty bitty capacitors that are there to balance out the charge and so forth. But anyway, back to Tesla. Sorry, I do get distracted when I start talking about this stuff. Tesla has bought this company, and the theory is that what they're going to do is create a situation where they will put ultra capacitors at the front end of things. Because one of the problems with batteries, even if they're really good batteries, is if you rapidly discharge them, it takes a long time for them to recharge, and they do lose some capacity. They get what's called dendrites, little things that grow inside the gel that's between the cathode and the anode, and that degrades the performance. And so having ultra capacitors, even though they don't have as high energy density as batteries, having ultra capacitors at the front end. So basically, if you need a lot of energy really fast, you deplete the ultra capacitors, and then you start to more slowly pull the battery power in. And then as you recharge, for example, regenerative braking or something, you brake rapidly, and what would happen is the energy can go super fast into the ultra capacitors, and then let's say you brake and then you accelerate and you still have some energy left in your ultra capacitors. As you're kind of driving down the highway or something, it can slowly charge the batteries if they have been depleted. So you've got a nice little buffer in between. That anyway is the theory for what is going on with Tesla's acquisition of this company, which is name I can't remember. I'll look it up in just a second. Anyway, so let me do a real quick check and just make sure. I'm pretty sure I'm right about how all this stuff works, but let me just do a super quick check. I'll fast forward the motion and we'll see. Okay. All right. So, yeah. Okay. A lithium-ion battery is a lithium-ion battery. It's a battery that uses lithium ions to do the charging. So plus for me, yay. That one was relatively easy. Gotta say, it's kind of in the name, so you can probably answer it. But hopefully I've given you a bunch of extra information that you didn't have before. And as far as the Tesla acquisition is concerned, it's Maxwell Technologies. That's what it is. So they purchased them. And I think that that's going to be an interesting thing to look at over the next couple of years. So anyway, there has been a lot of talk. John Goodenough is the inventor, or one of the main people who worked on the original lithium-ion batteries in the, I believe, the late 70s and early 80s to create the chemistry that was appropriate and to really start to bring it to mass market. And he's been talking lately about the fact that he's got a way better battery chemistry than exists today, but nobody has seen it so far. And I've seen a lot of interesting videos and articles about how we're sort of reaching the limit of battery potential because there's only so much energy density you can cram into these things without ultimately making them really dangerous. You know, if you remember back a couple of years ago, the Samsung, was it the S7? There was like all of that, like, you know, brouhaha about the fact that these lithium-ion batteries were burning. And then very, very tragically, recently, the boat in Southern California, the dive boat, where the theory is that someone's battery, like, you know, those little backup battery packs, caught fire because it was not either being charged properly or it was just a cheap, you know, knockoff item. If you think about it, you know, what's inside your phone, which is sitting in your pocket, which is right next to your, like, you know, naughty bits and stuff, it's kind of scary to imagine how much power is packed into that tiny area. And if there was any kind of short circuit, how much bad stuff could happen. Which is why you have to be really, really careful with these kinds of batteries. They, you know, as I said, they don't have the energy density of gasoline or something, but they have immense amounts of energy stored in really, really tiny places. That's how you can run these phones with these gigantic screens, or you know, I'm looking at my laptop right now that has a 13-inch screen, and it's got all this processing power and stuff, and yet I can, for the most part, run my computer all day long and never have to worry about the fact that the battery's going to die. That's impressive. That's something that, I mean, that's one of the major changes in more recent society, is that we have batteries that are this good. This is something that did not exist when I was a kid, right? You know, absolutely did not exist. And it's made a huge difference in our lives. We couldn't have laptops. We couldn't have phones. We couldn't have, I don't know, flashlights, right? You know, and you've also got LED lights, the LEDs that are in the front, which use a lot less power. But the batteries are hugely important to these things, to having the modern technology that we expect and that we're just used to. I mean, heck, when I go out biking or something like that, I've got a front light and a back light, and those guys are, you know, cranking away on lithium-ion batteries that I just recharge once every month or two, right? No big deal. You don't think about it that often, and yet it's like, wow, how impressive is that? So, I don't know. This is probably way more of an answer than you expected, but if you want to take anything away from this, it's the fact that you should really respect batteries. They are an amazing technology, and it's something that our contemporary, you know, 21st century society really depends on. It's something that is impressive. And I suppose on the downside of this, cobalt, manganese, lithium, all of these precious metals, rare earth metals, are very, very difficult to find. And a lot of times they are in politically unstable areas, like the Republic of Congo, I believe, is where cobalt is found almost exclusively. And it's something where, you know, there's a human and political consequence to the fact that we are extracting these minerals out of places that are very unstable, where the population does not get the wealth that they deserve from doing the work to bring this to the rest of the world. So it's a bit of a bummer, but it is worth thinking about in terms of, you know, when you're using these devices, you are supporting this type of stuff. So I know we're not going to give up our conveniences. I'm certainly not going to, but it is something that's a little bit sobering to think about that kind of activity going on, and to think about how we might do better as a global society to try to help out with these sort of situations. Anyway, sorry. That's kind of a downer way to end things. But hopefully you enjoyed this answer, and hopefully it gave you some fun information. And make sure, again, that you like and subscribe. Make sure you give me the little thumbs up, dude, and especially subscribe. And even more importantly, make sure that you ask questions, because the questions are what keeps this channel going. That's what makes it fun, and it makes it fun for me to answer. So I'll see you next time. Bye.